So good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming for this event for International Women's Day. And I'm Lina Abou-Habib from the American University of Beirut. And before giving the floor to our amazing guests and panelists, just want to make a few points in relation to International Women's Day, especially that this is happening against a background where many women and girls, particularly in the region, are going through the worst of times in terms of oppression, in terms of violence, military violence, in terms of occupation. So I wanted us to remember that this is what is happening meanwhile. And I want to, before we start, perhaps with the approval of our guest, just stand a minute of silence for all the women and girls in Palestine. Thank you. Thank you. So, unlike what we normally say or what we normally think, this is not the odd day of the year where we celebrate, but it's actually a day where we remember and honor all the journey and the fact that there is a day where we stop and think about achievements, about difficulties, and how did we get here and why there was this global acknowledgement of inequalities, of discrimination, of gender-based violence, and the ways in which women and girls and non-binary folks are disproportionately affected by political crises, economic crises, and certainly conflict, displacement, and climate injustice, I would say. So I would like just to add that we're having a conversation now with two countries from Latin America, and that's part of the work that the Asfari Institute at the American University of Beirut has been doing on exploring the power, the tool, the opportunities of what we now know as foreign feminist policies. And we will have ample time to discuss this in the coming hour. Our day will be in two segments. One segment will be with our friends and colleagues from Chile, from Mexico, and from Brazil. And then we will be moving to the beautiful archaeological museum at AUB, where we will continue this. Event in a film with a film screening from Brazil. I would like to basically start us off with opening remarks from our dear friend and colleague, Professor Nadia Cheikh. Nadia is a historian. She is somebody who has truly pushed for gender programs at the American University. I make a lot of mistakes when I speak, so please forgive me. Nadia has been a pioneer. She has established the first Women and Gender initiative at AUB, and she has supported most of the gender initiatives on campus, particularly the co-ed celebration a few years ago. Nadia will be speaking with us about AUB and about how to position this event within the overall policies of AUB. Thank you, Nadia.
Thank you very much, Lina, for your kind invitation and for organizing this panel on March 8th, which is a day to celebrate women's achievements and a day where we can hope for much more really that should be in store for women. I want to present about AUB and its pioneering role in co-ed education, as I believe that education is central to women's empowerment. And so I want to give you a little story about AUB and its pioneering role really in launching co-ed education as early as 1921. So until 1921, the only opening offered to women at AUB was in what was called at the time the training school for nurses. In 1921, at the end of 1921, there was a major change. And this change basically made AUB a pioneer in promoting women's education, emancipation, and empowerment. When AUB took the momentous step of admitting female students to the university. At the time, the acting president, Edward Negrelly, stated, and we have the statement, of course, in the archives, beginning this year, actually it happened at the end of the year, women are admitted as follows in the schools of medicine, pharmacy, and dentistry, in the sophomore class of the School of Arts and Sciences, and as a special students in courses above the freshman year in the School of Arts and Sciences. This historic decision placed AUB at the vanguard of co-education in the world, not only in Lebanon, not only in the region, but in the world. I emphasize the world because even stellar universities in the USA, the ones that we all, hope our children will be able to access, etc., they did not embark on such a path until much later, and I give you the evidence. It's some data about when Ivy League universities admitted female students. Yale and Princeton in 1969. Again, AUB, we saw women on campus of AUB in 1922. Yale and Princeton, 1969. Dartmouth in 1972, as you see in the newspaper, vote by substantial majority to admit women in 1972. Harvard, finally the merger between the all-women's college, Radcliffe College, and Harvard happens in 1977. Until then, the boys and girls went to different classrooms, different spaces, etc. Columbia University, 1981. And basically, the decision was taken in 1981 and the first cohort in 1983. So AUB was half a century, at least half a century ahead of its time. AUB's undertaking was a brave one indeed, as the university had to face severe criticism, being in a relatively conservative society in 1922. And here I quote Dr. Negrelly again, and I'm reading from the board. He wrote, "This new departure has been received in some quarters with great enthusiasm as marking a new era in the history of the university and in the life of women in the Near East. By others, the step has also met with severe criticism. There are those who question its wisdom and expediency. On the part of the university authorities, it represents deliberate action taken only after long and careful consideration of all the implications of the questions involved." So yeah, it was a very sensitive topic, and I'm sure the leadership faced a lot of backlash, and I know the leadership continues on several issues here at AUB to suffer backlash, and sort of going forward is certainly the best way to go about it. AUB's extraordinary daring venture fostered momentous changes that tripled through the Middle East. And it provided the women of Lebanon and of the region a unique experience and the possibility to imagine a different future, and it still does. I am an example, Lina is an example, we are all, examples of what education, at AUB implies for women and of course for men as well. And so indeed, AUB became, just a second. AUB became immediately a liberating and empowering space for women. It was in 1928 at the AUB chapel, as she was about to start off a speech, that Anbara Salam, you know, the daughter of the most important Muslim Sunni family in Beirut at the time, it was in 1928 at the AUB chapel, as she was about to start off a speech, that Anbara Salam lifted her veil in public for the first time. This happened at AUB. It was at AUB in West Hall in 1937 that the famous author May Ziadeh delivered her lucid and eloquent speech in praise of the humanities and the importance of the humanities education for any education. And this she did at the day after she had been released from the asylum. May Ziadeh is an important personality with a very sad story that many of us know. And it was at AUB that Wadat Qortas preached her new methods for the education of girls and women. In 2016, I asked the then professor of theater, Sahar Assaf, to enact these 3 historic moments, and she did a brilliant job with it, and we have them in videos. So it's just a few seconds of each of these moments that I want to share with you. So let's take a glimpse at these moments. So this is enacting Anbara Salam at the chapel.
الخميس 6 تشرين الأول 1913 نهضة الفتاة العربية.
كيف يمكن للفتاة العربية أن تكون عاملاً فعالاً في بيئتها؟
سلاماً يا ويست هول، يا موطن الفكر والرأي والحياة المنظمة في كرامة وحرية.
In 2016, and with the inauguration of a new president for AUB, Dr. Fadlu Khouri, we organized a symposium on the state of gender equity at AUB. 1905-2016, it was called Where Are We Now? The symposium included panels on AUB's efforts for the advancement of women, the state of faculty research and pedagogy, student actions for consciousness raising around gender, and AUB's initiatives for community engagement. I was appointed Dean of Faculty of Arts and Sciences in 2016, and one of my first actions was, as Lina has mentioned, was to initiate and support women and gender studies at AUB. We established a full-time faculty line in gender and women's studies at the time in the Department of English, and we launched a minor in gender studies. And the next year, UB received an endowed chair in women studies. It was established in 2017, the Altaf al-Sabah Visiting Chair in Women and Societal Development Studies. We were supposed to launch it officially in 2019 when the donor would come over. And of course, this, as you see from the date on the board, the meeting, the launch was supposed to take place on October 24, 2019. And in 2019, as most of you know, the situation collapsed in the country, and so we had to postpone. And I wanted to mention this to say that we as an institution are all the time and continuously faced with very difficult challenges that we try to outgrow as much as possible. The chair, of course, is still there and it's active, and yeah, it still is awaiting the launch. Provost Dawi. In 2000, I'm just giving you some glimpses of some of the important initiatives that relate to women and gender studies, etc. at AUB. In 2019, AUB also received an important Mellon grant on the Arab History Archive. And so this, in this initiative, the idea is to collect, organize, and provide access to around 200 interviews, especially from women who hail from the generation of the 1970s. So women who were active in the 70s and now are of very advanced age, and they have no written records about their activities, and the idea is to interview them. And the interviews were done during COVID and during all the problems. And the last stage would be to actually put up all of these interviews on the website of the UB libraries, and to have them in open access. Another important moment in AUB's development of women and gender studies was the UB Tomorrow's Leaders Gender Scholars Program, which also provides, it enhances students' awareness of gender inequality, which is one of the main topics of the March 8th meetings, and to equip them also with tools to enact change. By the end of the program, students are required to write papers, to attend gender-focused courses, participate in workshops, accomplish gender-related activities. The scholarship covers the tuition of the students for the year in which they are enrolling in it, and they enroll in gender courses, but also in other activities, as I said. And this actually has meant that AUB has had to sort of also rise up to present more numerous courses on gender and women's studies. Another very important initiative at AUB is the Center for Inclusive Business and Leadership for Women. This is based in the OSB, in the Olayan School of Business here at AUB, and it's a multidisciplinary and multi-sector team of researchers and practitioners dedicated to inclusive workplace practices and policies for women's economic participation across the Arab and Middle East. And it has received an important also donation from MEPI. It's called Civil, and it's active, and I think they had an event yesterday, actually, online event. And, last but not least, as far as the activities are concerned, not the last, it's one of many other initiatives at AUB, but the Asfari Institute for Civil Citizenship is also a main actor in promoting gender equity. As one of their main goals is precisely that, promoting gender equity. More specifically, to advance gender equality and women's rights through a multifaceted approach encompassing research and advocacy. Also to comprehend gender dynamics and issues in the region through academic research as well. And also to engage with local and international feminist organizations, and also to organize seminars and workshops like this one, I guess, to create a platform for dialogue and empowering communities to challenge gender norms and contribute to feminist progress in the region. 2 years ago, AUB celebrated 100 years of co-education. And for that, on that occasion, AUB launched AUB for Women campaign, which established scholarships for women students and encouraged support for existing also scholarship funds that benefit women students. AUB is a leading institution in the Middle East on issues of gender and equity. And it befits us to celebrate AUB as we celebrate International Women's Day. It's AUB's pleasure to celebrate the day with your excellencies, and I would now leave the floor to Lina. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Nadia. I think it's very important that we look at the timeline and we look at the progress, and we realize actually the many shoulders of women on whom we're standing. So thank you so much, Nadia. That was excellent. This event was co-created with the Embassies of Chile and Mexico, and one of the main contributions from our colleagues from Chile, who is the last country to have put out its foreign feminist policy in just last summer, I think. So I have the pleasure to show you a really powerful recorded message by the Chilean Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, a very young, a very feminist young Vice Minister, Ms. Gloria de la Fuente.
Hola a todos y todos. Hoy, 8 de marzo, ocasión en que conmemoramos el Día Internacional de la Mujer, quisiera enviar un fraterno saludo a todos y todas quienes se encuentran presentes en la actividad Leading from Latin America, Chile and Mexico, Redefine Feminist Foreign Policy, donde se establecerá un diálogo sobre cómo nuestros países trabajarán en la elaboración e implementación de la política exterior feminista desde el mundo en vías de desarrollo. Quisiera saludar especialmente a quienes han sido los organizadores de esta instancia, al Asfari Institute for Civil Society and Citizenship at the American University in Beirut, a la Embajada de México en el Líbano y, por supuesto, a nuestra Embajada de Chile en ese país. Para hablar de la política exterior feminista es fundamental abordar la igualdad de género desde las distintas perspectivas en el mundo. El norte global y el sur global enfrentan también diferentes desafíos respecto a la desigualdad de género. Cuando miramos a América Latina y el sur global, nos encontramos con una región donde el sexismo, el patriarcado y la cultura heredada persisten hasta nuestros días, manteniendo sus influencias en el pensamiento político y social. Somos conscientes que la desigualdad de género está asociada al propio desarrollo de los países. No debemos olvidar que hay varios otros factores como las tasas de educación, la economía y la salud que deben tenerse en cuenta cuando hablamos de igualdad de género. En América Latina muchas mujeres y las niñas sufren consecuencias de la pobreza, la falta de educación, la inestabilidad política, el narcotráfico, el cambio climático, las crisis alimentarias y la migración. Es por ello que la perspectiva del sur global debe ser considerada cuando hablamos de política exterior feminista, con un enfoque interseccional que se nos adecue también a los contextos socioeconómicos y culturales para su desarrollo, y no obedezca a un paradigma exclusivo de los países desarrollados. Esta perspectiva se ha incorporado en la política exterior feminista de Chile, para trazar aquellos ámbitos que se consideran prioritarios para su implementación. La política exterior feminista busca promover acciones de transversalización de género y eliminar los obstáculos que impiden que el avance de las mujeres y las niñas hacia el pleno ejercicio de autonomía y sus derechos sea parte de la realidad. Siendo, por cierto, su principal objetivo establecer el principio de igualdad y no discriminación como un eje rector en el quehacer de la política exterior de Chile. Hoy nuestra política exterior feminista emerge como una estrategia de inserción internacional y una prioridad para nuestra política exterior. Es en este sentido que se han definido como prioritarios los siguientes temas: los derechos humanos y el fortalecimiento de la democracia en pos de elaborar acciones normativas y políticas de igualdad de género bajo este marco. El promover la erradicación y la eliminación de la violencia de género, siendo una de las principales amenazas para el avance de la igualdad, de la paz y el desarrollo. El empoderamiento y la mayor representación de las mujeres en los espacios de toma de decisión en la política exterior. La Agenda Mujeres, Paz y Seguridad, para fomentar la presencia de mujeres en diversos ámbitos en su contribución a la paz y a la seguridad. Las relaciones económicas y comerciales como un elemento clave para la eliminación de barreras para la plena incorporación de las mujeres en la economía, así como para la recuperación económica con igualdad de género. La integración de la perspectiva de género en acciones ante el cambio climático para lograr políticas efectivas y sustentables en el largo plazo. La incorporación de las mujeres en la ciencia, la tecnología y la innovación para desarrollar un ecosistema inclusivo y participativo. Y el sistema integral de cuidados que reconoce como un derecho y un trabajo la contribución de las mujeres en el cuidado de niñas, niños, adultos mayores y otras personas dependientes. Quisiera agradecer esta instancia que sin duda contribuye a un trabajo activo por una mayor igualdad de género en el ámbito de la política exterior. Representa un paso adelante y consistente con la tradición diplomática de Chile desde hace casi 100 años, que se ha reflejado en la suscripción de una serie de declaraciones y acuerdos internacionales que buscan visibilizar la temática de la igualdad de género. Chile, en conjunto con los otros países de la región, somos reconocidos por nuestro compromiso con el respeto, defensa y promoción de los derechos humanos, así como el fortalecimiento de la democracia y, por supuesto, esperamos potenciar este trabajo para construir una sociedad más justa, inclusiva y sostenible.
Well, I want to thank Your Excellency for making this possible, and I have to make this comment. I think it's totally unfair that our sisters in Chile have this amazing minister, and I compare with ours, and I'm incredibly jealous. So, well, I don't know. I tried to have an exchange. They didn't approve. They didn't like it. We can do? Okay. Today?
Going to be a long day.
So again, Nadia, thank you so much for your amazing opening remark, and Vice Minister Gloria de la Fuente. We will begin our panel, and the way it will go is we will have opening remarks by His Excellency Ambassador Carlos Moran, Ambassador of Chile, and opening remark by His Excellency Francisco Romero, the Chargé d'Affaires for the Embassy of Mexico in Lebanon, and covering Syria as well, if I'm not mistaken. And we're joined also by a friend and alumni, an AUB FHS alumni, Zeina Abdel Khalik. Very happy to have you with us. Zeina is first and foremost an alumni, but also she is also the head of the first and only fund for donor for Arab feminists in the region. Thank you for joining us, and we're also joined by our colleague from Brazil, Renata Negrelly, who is going to share with us a very interesting initiative that she's leading in Lebanon. So welcome to you all. I will give the floor to Carlos for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Lina, for giving me the floor. And thank you for the presence of everyone here. I'm just like to thank the presence of my colleague, the ambassador from Argentina, and my colleague from the ambassador from Colombia, who just arrived. So thank you for your presence here, and thank you for the presence of everyone and to accept this invitation today. I have to say that I'm fully agree with the comments and the briefing presented by the Undersecretary. And this is not just because she's my big boss, but she made a very good summary about what we are doing in Chile in terms of the gender issues and the importance to advance on this matter, especially from the perspective from the developing countries. That is a very good summary, so thank you very much. And then, of course, I would like to thank to the Asfari Institute for making possible this event today. And especially I want to extend my thanks to my friend, Professor Lina Abou-Habib, and yes, well, yeah. So she is the one that really has been behind of everything today. I mean, she organized everything. She was the owner of the idea to organize this meeting today. And thank you, Lina, for giving me the opportunity to talk and to have this conversation, this friendly conversation that we are going to have today about the Chilean feminist foreign policy, and to give me the opportunity to share with you and with the audience the Chilean experience on this matter. And finally, just to say that it's quite pleasant to me to have the opportunity to discuss about these very important issues on this very important occasion. I mean, everyone mentioned today that we are celebrating the International Day of Women, and of course, this is not an accident that today, on March 8, we are going to make this, we are making this conference or conversation that we have. So thank you so much to everyone. And now, I just would like to say something about me, that is related with the presentation, of course. Before to join the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, many years ago, I was teaching for a couple of years at university, because I'm very proud to say that I am history teacher. So, like my wife, who is with me, we studied together many years ago also. So we are very happy to be here and working in a country like Lebanon, because it's the culture, it's extremely rich, and for us as a history teacher, it's a pleasure to be here. But in Chile, we say that professors or teachers, we have a kind of professional deformation, in terms that when I try to explain something, I used to go back to the very beginning of everything, and I try to explain step by step everything, right? Like a historical process. It is complicated, because I already prepared a presentation that is a little bit long, but I'm afraid that it cannot be possible today, because I see we have so many people. We are going to have so many speakers today, and even we are going to see a movie later. So I try to short my presentation, but not the dynamic of it. So, and because I like to go to the very beginning, I would like to start from the beginning. So Chile announced its willing or commitment to proceed with carrying out a feminist foreign policy in March 2022. And the main purpose behind of this decision made by the Chilean authorities was basically to enforce principles like, non-discrimination and gender equality as let's see, basically guiding axis of our foreign policy, essentially. Then I have to say that Chile ratified the CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, in 1989. And we already signed the additional protocol in 2019. As a history teacher, for me, years and dates are so important. And these years that I already mentioned are so important for what is happening today in Chile, in terms that practically all the important advances that we made in Chile in the last 3-4 years are, in a way, connected with something very important that happened in Chile in 2019. We had a movement, a social movement in Chile, quite close to the movement that you had here in Lebanon in October 2019. But I'm afraid that in the case of Chile, the result was completely different, unfortunately. And I'm very fortunate for us. So there were many changes in our society since that date, and it's impossible to understand the implementation of the Chilean feminist foreign policy without this movement that we had in 2019. If you have any question, or from the panel, to talk about this movement, that massive movement and social movement that we have in Chile. So back to the beginning again. After maybe a little bit over one year after the announcement, finally in June 2023, the feminist foreign policy was presented by our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the current Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Alberto Van Claveren, in Santiago, in our capital city. This determination of Chile demonstrate, in a way, our leadership on this matter. Chile, in fact, was the first South American country to implement a feminist foreign policy, but we follow the one that was the first in the whole region. And this is the case of Mexico. So congratulations to my colleague of Mexico. Probably he's going to mention about the importance of this Mexican feminist foreign policy, and we follow it, the Mexican, on this important initiative. And now getting into the topic, and just for finish this presentation, I just would like to make a simple and basic question. In fact, I prepared my presentation under the base of so many questions, and I try to answer those, and through the answer, I try to explain the importance of the FFP. But because the limit of time, I'm afraid that I'm just going to be able to make only the first question, right? And I try to answer to this question, and on this way, try to refer to the origin of the FFP, how we are implementing this FFP in our system, and the consequence or the effect of this FFP. So the first question is so simple, and the answer is quite simple also, but it's essential to understand these advances. And the question is, what led us to do this? So simple. What led us to do this? In other words, which were the motivations that we had at the moment when the Chilean authorities decide to make this step forward and advance on the implementation of this policy? And the answer is so simple. The search for a more just society, basically. The search for a more democratic society. And the recognition that the gender gaps that we had at that moment in our society, and that still having, unfortunately, in our society, they were important obstacles to achieve a real representative democracy. And this is one of the most important objectives from the current presidency of the President Boric today, to reach in Chile a real representative democracy, right? One in where we can promote and inform and promote and strengthen the rights of our women and girls. That was the idea behind this decision. And something that is very important is the fact that we made the announcement of this policy in March 2022. We present the draft of this new policy in June 2023, and we just started to apply this new policy, as Lina mentioned, last summer. So I'm afraid that we are not today in a position to make an extended evaluation, right, about the real effects and consequence or implications of this new policy. But despite the fact that we started to apply this feminist foreign policy in October last year, the thing is that Chile made very important advances since maybe 2010, but particularly after 2019, after the social outbreak that we had in Chile. Just to talk about the gender gaps, for instance, and accordingly with the latest information that I have been able to get from the Global Gender Gaps Index, Chile today occupies position number 27, and with Paulo, we confirmed that position a few days ago at the United Nations here in a very important meeting that was held here in Beirut. Chile occupied the position number 27 out of 156 countries in terms of gender gap. And this is a very important advance, taking in consideration that just 3-4 years ago, Chile occupied position number 70. So we have been able to move from position number 70 to position number 27 in just 3-4 years. And this is basically because the important changes that we have and the implementation of the social agenda in our country as a consequence of this very important movement and social movement that we have in 2019. I think this is, I can finish now. This is just a presentation. Then I'm going to be very happy to respond all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos. And actually, you've responded to the first question that I had in mind, which is the political process that led to adopting a feminist foreign policy, and also so far what has been the experience.
But I have to say so many things about the political process also. Yes.
So actually, we will have a second round, and maybe I think that's because that's the point that is important for us. But also, you mentioned that. What is the position currently in terms of the global gender gap?
27.
27. I think we're below, Jumana can tell us? Lebanon is 140 plus, so 142, merci Joel. So these are, I mean, the figures speak for themselves, so thank you. Francisco, again, as Carlos was saying, Mexico was the first Latin American country to adopt foreign feminist policy. So it's been around for 4 years, and we would all be happy to hear your opening remarks about this. Thank you.
I'm very pleased to be here at the prestigious American University of Beirut and at this event organized by the Asfari Institute to celebrate this significant date, the International Women's Day. I thank Dr. Lina Abou-Habib for her kind invitation and her wise initiative, because today we will have the opportunity to share and exchange some ideas in a topic that is of a great importance, which is feminist foreign policy in general, but also with a focus on Latin America. Although there were some previous achievements, from the beginning of this century, Mexico has been moving forward in its internal agenda to promote gender equality. I will mention some of the main achievements. Since 2018, we had twice a parliament with the most gender parity of our history. Currently, by the way, we have in Mexico 2 chambers, deputies and senators. Currently, the Chamber of Deputies has 50% women, 50% men, while women are 50.4% of the Senate and men are 49.6%. To that, I would also like to add that women hold the presidency of the parliament and of both chambers. I'm also glad to say that the president of Mexico's Supreme Court of Justice is also currently in the hands of a woman. And in addition, Mexico will soon have presidential elections, and 2 out of 3 candidates are women. As for the exterior, Mexico became the first country in the global South to embrace the gender perspective in its national action by announcing the adoption of a feminist foreign policy in 2020. It is important to say that in the absence of a concrete definition of what a feminist foreign policy is, a lot of interpretations, ambitions, and priorities have emerged all around the world. In the case of Mexico, the famous foreign policy takes shape through the human rights mainstreaming approach and the gender perspective in all areas of Mexican foreign policy, which is positioning, resolutions, agreements, candidacies, delegation integrations, etc. For these, alliances are being built with countries that encourage these principles in multilateral forums. Seeking to promote it in our region, the last action was this month during the 8th Summit of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, which took place in March 1st and 2nd in St. Vincent and Grenadines. There, the Mexican foreign minister, who by the way is also a woman, Alicia Bárcena, announced the adoption of the Declaration on Feminist Foreign Policy for Latin America and the Caribbean. This initiative, which is co-sponsored by Chile and Colombia, and had the support of Bolivia, Brazil, Ecuador, and Dominican Republic, represent a milestone in the promotion of the principles of gender equality in the region. With this alliance, the acceding countries, which represent 70% of the region's population, will govern their foreign policy based on the principles of gender equality and towards elimination of gender gaps and violence, the participation of women, and their leadership in the international arena. The feminist foreign policy seeks to set at the regional level the commitment to address the root causes of inequality, such as discrimination, violence, and poverty. This declaration stands out for its intersectional approach, taking into account the interconnection of different types of discrimination, such as gender, race, social class, and sexual orientation. Furthermore, it considers the active collaboration of international organizations and civil society within the design of specific measures to advance towards substantive equality in our countries. By promoting this declaration, Mexico reaffirms its commitments to advance towards the empowerment and equality of women. Likewise, issues that have been promoted locally, such as the recognition of women and all their diversity and gender parity at all levels of government, are being placed on the international agenda. We still have a long way to go. But Mexico considers that feminist foreign policy is an influential tool to build a more just and equal society. An approach that seeks to change the structures that prolong inequality as long as to promote peace, security, and economic development for all people. Thank you.
Thank you. And I actually want to make a couple of comments based on what you both have said. Well, sir, first of all, both their excellencies are speaking on behalf of their women feminist bosses. So that's a nice situation. I'm incredibly happy with it. Both Mexican Minister Alicia Ibarra, who has been actually celebrated when she was appointed by the international feminist movements, and also Gloria de la Fuente from Chile, whom we have just seen. So I hope we will have more of this, particularly in our region. And the other point that I want to make is that the official framing of something called foreign feminist policy, which is countries adopting policies, feminist policies that would direct their diplomatic relations and foreign relations, did start indeed in 2014 with Sweden and followed by Canada. As we speak now, Sweden has gone back and has actually dropped its foreign feminist policy. That's one of the reasons why we also wanted to have this conversation on leading from Latin America and also leading from the South on making foreign feminist policies, not just about how do we deal outside with other countries, but also domestically. And so thank you for both your interventions. I want to turn to our AUB alumni and colleagues, Zeina Abdel Khalik. Zeina, as I said, so you head the first feminist fund for feminist organizations and feminist groups in the MENA region. And I know that as feminist funds, it's the ways in which you engage with foreign feminist policies is critical. What are your thoughts about this? What are the opportunities that have been created by foreign feminist policies? And how can this engagement be stronger with Latin America and with countries from the global South? Over to you, Zeina.
Thank you, Lina. So I would like to start by talking a bit about the power of feminist movements. So in the global South and around the world, international feminist movements and organizations are at the front lines of demanding equality and justice, both locally and globally. They hold the line, especially during times of crisis, as we're witnessing all around the globe. Across their efforts, these movements and organizations, they resist authoritarianism, they defend democracy, they demand public accountability and good governance, and advance economic, environmental, and gender justice agendas. They work tirelessly to transform oppressive norms, structures, and institutions, and build more just and equitable spaces for all. While we have witnessed in recent years that several governments have adopted feminist foreign policies and committed to increase their support for women and girls, more than 99% of these resources have never reached feminist movements globally, particularly in the global South. The current disconnect between intent and practice when it comes to resourcing feminist movements reveals the unrealized potential of feminist foreign policy. Official development assistance, I'm going to talk a bit about donor countries because this is also very crucial. As you mentioned, Lina, Sweden has dropped its feminist foreign policy. Canada is still committing to it. Germany has developed one recently. The Dutch are a feminist donor despite not having an official feminist foreign policy. So advocating with the global north countries who have feminist foreign policies and who are donor countries is very crucial to ensure that resources are also flowing to movements in the global south. So official development assistance data shows that the total amount that went to women's rights organizations in 2018-2019, official development assistance are the countries that have are the DAC countries, so they are the European, Canada, and countries that are committed to developing, to support developing countries. So the total amount that went between 2018-2019 to women's rights organizations was $581 million. This amount dropped in 2020 and 2021 to $574 million. And out of all this money that addressed climate change and gender equality objectives, 0.22, so less than 1%, actually went to women's rights organizations. Another shocking observation is that from 2/3 of all the money that's committed by donor countries, by the DAC countries, stays in these countries. This money, 2/3 of the total amount goes to civil society organizations that are based in the global north. So basically 1/3 is actually received by countries in the global south. And this happens despite the commitments made by countries with feminist foreign policies to promote gender equality, and despite knowing that strongly supporting feminist movements with abundant and flexible dedicated resources is central to delivering on the vision and potential of international feminist foreign policies. Bilateral donors have the most stringent requirements and restricted funding modalities that don't and generally cannot reach feminist movements. Meanwhile, the most flexible money tailored to movements' priorities, needs, and demands sits in the smallest pool, which are mostly women and feminist funds, as Doria Feminist Fund, which is covering the whole Middle East and North Africa region with very limited resources, with all the escalating needs that we're witnessing across the region. Unfortunately, and I would like to highlight this, that we're only able to cover 10% of the eligible applications that we receive, with the escalating needs and the increase in applications that we've been witnessing. And despite all our resource mobilization efforts, we're going to be able to support only 5% of the applications. A lot of advocacy efforts have been conducted by all women and feminist funds. I would like also to circle back to our esteemed colleagues and say that Latin America has very vibrant and strong women and feminist funds who are doing amazing work in showcasing the importance of the work of women and feminist funds in channeling resources to grassroots at the local level in a very flexible manner, in a manner that's responsive to the needs and priorities of these needs, and have been exemplary actually in supporting the advocacy efforts across the globe. So a lot of advocacy efforts have been conducted with bilateral donors and with countries with feminist foreign policies, and we've been witnessing some successful examples. For instance, the Netherlands have funded a consortium led by 4 women funds from the Global South. It's called Leading from the South, with a big budget, and it was the first important initiative that's fully led by organizations from the Global South. It was funded in 2017 with a budget of 42 million over 4 years, and it was scaled up in 2020 with a funding of 80 million euros over 5 years. So there has been some successes, yet a lot has to be done to ensure that feminist foreign policies translate into more actual resources being channeled directly to the movements.
Thank you. Thank you, Zeina, for the data you presented, which really puts in perspective the whole ecosystem of international aid, donors' policies, and the impact so far of foreign feminist policies which are adopted by donor countries, as you have met. And it really shows us the tiny trickle down, particularly to our region. And I want to share with you that in May we will be hosting a conversation on philanthropy in the MENA region, in the MENA/SWANA region. Try to understand a little bit what does it mean to mobilize funding from this region the difficulties, the opportunities, and that's something that we will be working on with the Doria Feminist Fund, because this is a sector that is changing, but not much positively, actually negatively at the time when the needs are arising. So thank you, Zeina. I want to go back to you, Carlos, and if we can discuss a little bit more the internal political process leading to adopting a foreign feminist policy. Chile is not, for the moment at least, and as far as I know, a donor country. But nevertheless, it went into this process of thinking through its foreign feminist policy and adopting it. So that process must have been complicated, challenging, and I don't think it was seamless. So maybe you can, reflect a little bit more on the politics of how did we get here.
Thank you, Lina, for your question. It's a very important question, and I understand that you want to know basically how this feminist foreign policy affect, or the consequence of the implementation of this policy in our system, right? This is what I understand. So the feminist foreign policy established basically the gender equality as one of the most important strategic objectives in our foreign policy. Three things. This is the first. The second is that the FFP also reinforced principles like democracy and human rights as an essential part of our foreign policy also. And the third point is that it recognized that the existence of these gender inequalities and gaps in our system, it's a very important obstacle for the full exercise of the human right of our women and on the system, right? These are the three key points in terms of the implicances in our foreign policy. But talking about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the system in terms of the effect of this policy, it's a little bit complex because I'm here representing this system, and in a way I am part of the old-fashioned way because I'm representing the old members of the system. So let me say something. At the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the implementation of the feminist foreign policy has been complex, definitive, right? I have to be very honest, complex and very difficult. It had to face so many obstacles and difficulties, right? And resistance. Resistance that is coming basically for those groups that represent more conservative groups inside the ministry that we're still having at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, indeed. And I will say that these resistance and obstacles came mainly from colleagues and members of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who are part of my own generation. I mean, people between 50, 55, 60, 65 years old, more or less. But I have to say something. All those people like me, we are all dinosaurs, and we are going to disappear in the next 5, 6 years, basically because at 65, we have to present our resignation by age. So that means that all those people who are, in a way, resisting the system, it's going to disappear in just maybe 5, 6, 7 years. Many of them, not all, but many of them. So this is something that you have to take in consideration. And when I joined the system, when I joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and now I can tell you when, that was in April 1988, so 36 years ago. Around 20% of the training course were women, 20%. And this is very important to take in consideration, but because the same proportion of women that we had 35 years ago is the proportion of women that we have today, because we're moving from 1988 to 2023. So, and we have a very long career that start as a third secretary and finish as a minister counselor. And it takes, for me, 33 years just to reach the last stage of this career. And this is not the position of ambassador, because when we are appointed as an ambassador, we have to make our resignation to the system because it is considered that is a political appointment. So ambassador lives in a different, let's see, stage of the career, right? But what happened with the latest stage of this system? they have been working and passing all those different states for the last 35 years. And the thing is that the gender balance, it doesn't exist because we have the same proportion that I already mentioned, 20%. And this is exactly so. When the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have to make the list of possible ambassador or chief of mission, the law indicates that first they have to try to find those possible candidates from the list of this latest stage of the career, from the minister counselor. And what happened is that the choices that the ministry have is not really, because we have today 85 minister counselors, and we have just maybe 25 women. This is the proportion today, less than 25%. So what is the system? What the system is doing now, and this is the problem and the distortion that we are creating with this implementation of the 100% of the, let's see, feminist foreign policy. It's a problem because we try to change, right, this system by a decree, by a law, and this is not the way. We have, if we can wait maybe 7-8 years, the system is going to be completely equilibrated naturally, because those new generation, like Pablo is representing here the mammals that are coming to replace the dinosaur like me. So probably, Pablo, just let us know how many women you have in your training course. 45%. So they are coming. They are coming, and this is just a matter of time. It is not necessary to try to change everything at once. We made a terrible mistake in Chile as a consequence of this try. For instance, in the case of our 2 tries to create a new constitution. That was a unique case in the world, in the history. A country that in less than 4 years tried to create a new constitution. We made a big mistake because we tried to change the country. We tried to reborn the country at once. And this is impossible. We need a process. We need time. And this is the most important lesson that we learned from this experience that we had. You can do everything. You can try to change your society. You can make substantive changes in your society. It's absolutely possible, but you cannot do all at once. That is the most important lesson. And the same in terms of what is happening today at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's just a matter of time to wait. But just let me explain the distortion itself. The system, because there is no enough number of women on the list of this minister counselor, the latest stage of the career, they are jumping back. They are looking for more women, of course, because we need more women in the system, right? And they are jumping back to the previous degree. And if there are not enough women on this previous stage, they are jumping back to the previous one. And this is the distortion, because the women on that position, they are average 15, 20 years younger than those dinosaurs that we are in the latest stage of the career. And that will be a big distortion, because if someone of those in those positions, some woman from this position is appointed as an ambassador, she will be ambassador for the next 25 years. And this is not logical. You are general maybe for 10 or 6 years, but not for 25. You are admiral from the Navy maybe for 6 or 7 years, but not for 25. And that will be a big problem for the women that are coming on the system. So that's why we are making very important advances on this, in terms that we already have more women in a position of ambassador. Just a few numbers, a few figures. We have today 86 ambassadors, 86. And from those 86, just 24 were women. And I say were, talking about the past, because since 2001, that changed, because we started to apply the principle of, let's see, trying to look more balanced society and more balanced minister. And today, we have more than 36 women occupying the position of chief of mission, ambassador. So that means that today, 37% of our ambassadors are women. And this is a very important advance if you take in consideration that just 10 years ago, they were less than 10%. So this is an advance, right, in terms of the, let's see, significance of the application of this FFP in the particular case of Chile, right? Yeah.
Thank you. And I see with us Joël Abi Farhat from 50/50. So I'm just warning you that I would like you to comment maybe after we finish this round of questions, because this is exactly what you're working on. And I want to turn again to Francisco, and well, first of all, acknowledging that I have a bias vis-a-vis Mexico, but also there have been so many amazing advances in terms of the right to abortion, the right to same-sex marriage, the rights of queer folks, you know, the efforts for stopping gender-based violence. And I was wondering whether you can reflect on this and on the efforts that made this happen and the impact of, I mean, is this hand in hand with the impact of adopting a feminist foreign policy, the work of the the very strong feminist movements in Mexico? So I guess what I'm asking is, after 4 years, what has happened, and how can you, was it possible to attribute these advances to having a serious foreign feminist policy?
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes, Mexico, and I will say in the last governments, has been, all of them, each of them have been working very hard on the development of the human rights. Of course, and a lot of people who knows Latin America and Mexico specific, they know we have a society where men and the role of men were important, even though when they ask me if Mexicans are machos, I say yes, but Mexican women are machas. I don't know if there are other examples, but if you think of it, during the Mexican Revolution, which started in 1910, we had Mexican soldiers who were women, and they were fighters. They were fighting in horses and with weapons and taking care of the children and the family. And they were called Adelitas, and they were very famous, and some of them were so feared. A lot of men and generals of the army were afraid of them because they were very strong women. So in our society, we had always very strong women. And since our society is around 50-50% of men and women, slightly more women, during the last decades, Mexico has been developed to give them the place they have. Of course, as I said, we still have a long way to go because there is a lot of things that are hard to change, and especially in certain areas, in certain groups. But we have had in the last years a lot of achievements, as Lina mentioned. First was, a few of them was exactly the abortion and the same-sex marriage. Some of these initiatives started state by state. We have a federal system, and every state has its own parliament. So it became like legal in one state, but not on the others. And then it was growing. It was growing. The same for these the initiatives to protect women. We have had a lot of structures. We have been creating a lot of structures for protections and of the rights. And this been growing and going to the federal system. And they became, by the same impulse of the states, for all the country. It's been hard. We have a lot of groups against that are conservatives. in the matter of their way of thinking, religion, or whatever. But it's there, and it's a fact, and I have to say. But all this process has been going and being reflected in the foreign policy. Mexico has been pioneer on many things. If I'm not wrong, because I was born, but very almost a baby, during the Olympic Games in 1968, it was a woman, the one who brought the Olympic torch in Mexico for the first time. And for decades, in 1975, if I'm not wrong, there was the United Nations declared the woman that year, the year of the woman, and Mexico made the first. Mexico made the first international forum about women. Then Mexico started signing international agreements, and as a logical, we started implementing all of them, and especially the Declaration of Beijing of 1995. After that, when Mexico ratified it, we started really reflecting what the compromises were there. And that came as a logic way as the status where we are now. And it keeps growing. It keeps growing.
Thank you. And again, it's this historical pathway which is important, and the ways in which different dynamics get together so that we move forward. And I'm glad you mentioned Mexico hosted the first international conference on women in 1975, and that was what got the ball rolling until 1995. We didn't have one, but I'm happy that we're having this conversation now here, because next week at exactly the same time we will be having this conversation at our AUB office in New York on foreign feminist policy, with the permanent representation of Mexico and of Finland, also to discuss where we are and how we can move ahead. So thank you very much. And I think maybe I want to add something. You mentioned it briefly, Francisco. Next year, Mexico will be hosting the global meeting for feminist foreign policy. This year? 2024? Yeah. This year, later this year. Last year it was organized and hosted in Holland. We are sure that Mexico will do better because we've heard some comments about Holland, which, so we're sure you're going to do better. I want to move on to the Secretary of the Embassy of Brazil in Lebanon, Renata Negrelly. Renata, thank you for being with us. And again, I'm very happy that you're going to share with us your particular experience on the work of the Association of Women Brazilian Diplomats. And I think, Carlos was mentioning it, and later on Francisco, being a diplomat was not by default associated with being a woman. That's actually more of an advance in the last couple of decades. So I'm very happy to hear about your work from Brazil.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the Asfari Institute for this invitation. I think the best way to celebrate Women's Day is to keep fighting for women's inclusion and empowerment. So I really welcome your presence, and I'm honored to be here. I would also like to say that I'm very honored to be joining this table with the embassies of representatives of Mexico and Chile, who had already adopted feminist foreign policy, and I think Brazil has a lot to learn from you. I also welcome the presence of the ambassadors of Colombia and Argentina, and especially the ambassador of Argentina, since she's the only female ambassador from Latin America now in Beirut. So Brazil has not formally adopted a feminist foreign policy so far, but gender issues have been part of our diplomatic agenda for many years, and they had a strong comeback in 2023. I would just mention some examples. We now have our first female deputy minister of foreign affairs. Brazil created the position of High Representative for Gender Issues for the first time. As President pro tempore of the G20, Brazil created a working group on women's empowerment. We also included in our government's action plan for 2024 to 2027 the objective of ensuring that all areas of foreign policy take into account gender and racial equality. We joined the Global Arrangement on Trade and Gender. We joined the Declaration of Latin American and Caribbean Countries on Feminist Foreign Policy, as was already mentioned by the previous speakers. And when it comes specifically to funding action, addressing the comments of Zeina, I would like to highlight that Brazil is organizing an international peace operation course for women. And even though it's just a small contribution, we are trying to fund the participation of women military from countries of the Global South. And we hope that a Lebanese woman can participate in this training. However, a strong gender imbalance remains within our ministry. Women make up only 23% of Brazilian diplomats and an even smaller proportion of heads of posts abroad, around 17%. Most male diplomats in Brazil, when they retire, they have reached the highest levels of the career, which in Brazil are ambassador or minister, while the women diplomats, they have reached just the intermediate levels. Even if we have had some progress in the percentage of women entering the diplomatic career, it's still around 30 to 40%, depending on the year, which is much lower than the proportion of women in our society, which is higher than 50%. And unfortunately, I'm very sad to say that, but we never had a woman as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, unlike our colleagues in Latin America. So in the case of Brazil, unfortunately, Mr. Ambassador, I believe that change will not come naturally. I think we have to fight for it now. So the inevitable question that pops in our mind is, how can we effectively promote gender equality externally if this gap still exists at home? Because there's the realms of domestic and foreign affairs are inevitably connected, and they are mutually reinforcing. So the Association of Brazilian Women Diplomats was created formally in 2023 to confront this situation. You have the opportunity to watch in a couple of minutes the film Exteriores, directed by Ivana Diniz, which is attending this conference as well. Hello, Ivana, welcome. So the film was an initiative crowdfunded by the Brazilian diplomats before the formal establishment of the association. And in the film, you'll have the opportunity to see in details in the interviews with many Brazilian diplomats the challenges we face in entering and progressing in our career. Of course, as the Chargé d'Affaires of Mexico mentioned, part of the problem is due to structural sexism and patriarchal values that still remain in, I can say, global society in general. But it's also a consequence of the way our ministry is organized. So there is place to fight and to achieve results in the short term, I guess. There's still a long way to go, but the association have already made some important progress, especially in raising awareness about the issue and visibility within our ministry and within the Brazilian society in general. For instance, the association created a podcast called Women on the Map, with interviews with female Brazilian diplomats who stand out in their fields. We have launched last week an observatory of inclusive feminist foreign policy, where researchers are going to be dedicated to analyzing and generating knowledge about the subject. The association has also published several articles and participated in interviews in many media outlets in Brazil. They have been contacting and exchanging experiences with associations of diplomats in other countries, not only in Latin America, but worldwide, and also liaising with associations of civil servants in other areas of the Brazilian government. The association has also been very active in lobbying inside our ministry to try to put some pressure for institutional change, to help promote gender parity in entering the career and also in the promotions, including having clearer rules for the promoting and posting of diplomats abroad, so that women are not discriminated against, having a greater understanding of the bottlenecks on women's career advancement, and so on. So we still have a long way to go. Just to mention another example, which is a personal example, I am the first ever female diplomat to be posted in a permanent mission in our embassy in Lebanon, even though our embassy was created in the 40s. And thank you. Now we are two of us. Our deputy head of mission is also a woman. And so my conclusion is that one thing is certain, female diplomats, they don't lack the capacity of occupying leading positions and making amazing contributions to foreign policy. We just lack the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me take questions.
Just a few comments. Very short, very short.
Are you
Renata, we are fully supporting your fight, right? Okay.
I have three comments. Two have been, I self-imposed them. So Joël, Jumana wanted to say something. And I see a friend and a colleague, our fellow Lamia Mbayed, whom I want to put on the spot because she's been in government for so long, and I would really like to hear from her. So let's start with you, Joël, and then Jumana, and then Lamia.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Women's Day to everyone, men and women. Okay, so I would like to ask you, what would be your advice for us Lebanese women who are fighting really to have our basic rights, knowing that we only have 5% of women in municipalities, 6% in the parliament, and only one woman in the government, caretaking government as well. So how do you think we should move forward in terms of having not only a feminist foreign policy, but at least a feminist local policy to start with? Thank you.
Jumana? Sorry, can you introduce yourself? Did you introduce yourself?
So I'm Joël Abou Farhat, 50-50 president, 50-50 NGO. So we're fighting to have equality, especially in politics.
Jumana, can you also introduce yourself, please?
Jumana Zabani, UN Women. One of the portfolios, the main portfolios I manage is the Women, Peace and Security. So I would like to give quick comments on the presentations. Number one, it's extremely interesting to discuss the feminist foreign policy. So thank you, Lina, to pioneer this work. This is from the perspective of countries from the South. And why is this important? Because in the field, when we promote these values, these principles, these targets, these policies, it is much easier for us to promote these standards when they are seen as valid for countries that look like us, that are similar to us. I'll give you an example, like if you push for child marriage law in Lebanon, and then you say Saudi Arabia passed a child marriage law, then the conversation opens easily. So the more countries that are similar to us, have the same background context, survivors of wars, conflicts, etc., poverty rates are similar, the easier for us it is to push for these standards. So thanks for focusing on the South, and hopefully we will have more Arab countries coming on board and countries from the region. The other thing I want to mention is to answer what Zeina has proposed on the issue of funding. We are underfunded, we are under-resourced, that's for sure. But on top of that, we are also questioned when we promote feminist foreign policy principles. Where is this money coming from? Is it coming from countries that have double standards? And I want to highlight a comment that was made by Lina, domestic laws, domestic practices within the country that is provided the funding are always linked to the way they implement foreign policy. I'll give you an example. We have 250 women doing peace building at community level across the country in Lebanon. One major source of conflict is a competition over low-skilled jobs with Syrian refugees. Let's put the thing on the table, right? So we go and say, no, we have to have inclusive approaches and all. And the response is your donor implementing this embracing culture for refugees before you come talk to us about it? So if the money, the source of the money comes from a country that doesn't apply these principles domestically, we are questions, and we are also putting our women at risk. Talking, for example, about our donors. I mean, unfortunately, countries from the South are less likely to be donors for programs related to gender equality in general and feminist foreign policy issues. But looking at, for example, the situation that we are facing now, conflict in the South, we have a minimum of 5 women groups operating in the South on de-escalation, on conflict, on GBV, and all of it. And the moment, I mean, they also feel a little bit dizzy now. What do we do? Do we step out of this program because the countries funding us are not taking the foreign policy standards and positions we need to stop this conflict from happening? So we're always questions. I mean, as we speak now, I don't know whether you know, but there is a demonstration happening in front of you and women offices, our offices now, asking us to improve the way we behave in these situations. So the accountability issues are nowadays, especially among younger women, the younger women generation. If you look at the photos from the protests now that is happening at UN Women, it's mainly women below the age of 30, activist, feminist, diverse, and all of it. But they also demand, you know, are you promoting things? Do you walk the talk? And and if we can't prove that we're walking the talk, it's putting our women at community level, because that's what matters, at risk. Because now they are looked at as complice. What is it? Complicit. And they have the choice of facing the violence that they will face, stepping out, withdrawing, and we're losing because people now are in this accountability situation. And tell me, you are really genuine, you're not contributing to the arms deal, you are not an arm dealer, and at the same time promoting a feminist foreign policy, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Jumana. Lamia? Can you introduce yourself?
Thank you for putting me on the spot. And
yes.
I know that Sarah is behind that, so. Because I tried to hide myself. My name is Lamia Mbayed. I had the Institute of Finance, Basil Flayhan, which is the Center for Excellence in Public Financial Management, something that scares people away and something that today resonates pretty badly in the mind of Lebanese who are subjected to the worst, I think, financial, economic, and social crisis ever in the history of this country. It's so interesting what you just said and what you have just explained, but I would like, if Lina allows me, because I have been contributing as a fellow only recently to the Asfari, which I think is a wonderful platform to bring all these different ideas together. But Latin America, and particularly Chile, which I know much more than Mexico, has a wonderful also story to tell in terms of women participating to better public financial management through mechanisms like gender public procurement. Chile Compra, who has been pioneer and has won 2 times the United Nations Public Service Award for not only bringing more transparency to how public money is spent, but also to making women and women's small enterprise learn to tap on this wonderful big market that is financed by taxpayers' money. So there are so many stories to tell in this part of the world which that can actually inspire us, and God knows how much we need inspiration in this part of the globe to just get our act going on more gender equality. So thank you for all.
Thank you, Lamia. I want to move us forward, so I'm going to give each one of our amazing panelists a couple of minutes to respond and perhaps also to reflect, and maybe want to start with Zeina and finish with Renata. So please, Zeina, your final thoughts, and maybe if you want to respond on any of the three comments that were made.
Yeah, I just want to go circle back to the issue of feminist foreign policy and accountability. And going back to the story that you alluded to, Lina, what happened in The Hague this year during the feminist foreign policy meeting, and what does it mean to uphold the feminist values that are very well spelled out in the feminist foreign policies, but not yet put into action at times of extreme polarization, as is the case now. So I'm just going to give a quick example. Germany led a very amazing, comprehensive, consultative process with over 100 feminists to develop its feminist foreign policy. It's very well documented, it's very well written, but what happened when the time actually came to put it into test? So I think it's not just about being consulting with the feminist groups and organizations during developing the policy. What's important is to have these groups being integral part of the whole process in terms of monitoring and ensuring that the implementation actually is in line with the words that are written in the feminist policy. So I think this is all, and I would like to encourage our colleagues from Chile and Mexico, because they're present in the same circles as the diplomats from the donor countries, from the global North countries, to keep advocating for the need to have feminist activists all the time influencing and ensuring that the feminist policies are in line with the feminist values that we are all upholding. Thank you.
Thank you. Francisco, can I turn to you for your final comments?
Thank you very much. I'm talking about a bit about your comments. I would like to say that everything takes time. Yes, of course, I was talking about the Mexican women in the revolution riding horses and with weapons, but it's been a process. It's not that still going on. It's been a process, a long process. But women are strong everywhere, and here in Lebanon, here, it's not the exception, of course. Lebanese women are very strong women, and you can see it in every field that they really can make amazing jobs. And when I came to this country, I realized of something, that there is a gap between this society and the laws. A lot of the systems, it's not updated. You talk to people, but when you realize how it goes in paper, it's very different. So this is something that has to be reflected, because there's evolution everywhere, and this is one of the things where you can go a lot farther. And as I say, my country had things that it's been very controversial, even internally, like, for example, gay marriage. It's been something that took long, but was a step by step. Then started in one state, the other state, and all the other issues, abortion, women more in power. By the way, we had already four foreign affairs ministers that were women. But I remember the first governor, was a woman, long time ago, and then two, and then they started growing. At the end, you have in your hands, you as society, as women, what is the percentage in your percentage in the country? You all, this is a democracy. You all can be brave, be candidates, vote. You have the vote. That's the way. You do something for yourselves. And that's my encourage. You start working on it. What are you doing in Mexico? In Spanish, you say, el buen juez por su casa empieza. The good judge by home starts at their own home. So what am I doing as a woman to empower us or to develop us? If I do always the same, it's not going to change. So that's for me the idea. Just as women to go further, to do things, to empower, to be empowered. That's what I will think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francisco. Carlos.
Okay, thank you. I think that there are many comments, and I really appreciate those comments, but I'm trying to concentrate in Joel. Okay, I think that it concentrates everything that we have been talking here on this evening, on this morning. You ask about a possible, let's see, advice, right, in terms of our experience to reach a more balanced society, especially in terms of the gender equality. But I have to say something. For a diplomat, it's a little bit difficult when you have to deal with the internal affairs, right? I have a limit. I just have the possibility to refer to my own experience as a Chilean and what's happening in my country. So I already mentioned that we made very important advances in terms of the gender equality and to reach a more balanced society in the last 10 years. But something is very important is that none of these things that are happening today in Chile would have been possible without this social movement that we have in Chile. Massive, organized, and with a very good reaction from the political establishment, a very good reaction from the, let's see, government. I think we have a huge movement in Chile, not with 100,000 people protesting on the street. We have millions of people protesting on the street, claiming for better salaries, better pensions, better access to education, better health, and so many things. Because people were waiting for decades, in the case of Chile, the real implementation of the social agenda, and never happened. Never happened. That is very interesting because in a country like Chile, Chile was for many years the country that led the region in terms of the growth, in terms of the income salary. And probably Chile was the first country that really, let's see, overcome poverty in our continent. Definitive. When the dictatorship of General Pinochet finished in 1990, 48% of the Chileans lived under the level of poverty. 25 years later, that number was reduced to 12%. So the movement, the social movement that we had in Chile was able to, let's see, facilitate and facilitate the emergence of these new voices that have been silent for years. Right? New groups representing youth, secondary students, university students, feminist groups, gender community group, representative from our minorities, from our indigenous people, and so on. They started to gain power and more visibility. That was the most important consequence of this social movement that we had. And the most important thing is that the political establishment and all the political parties react in front of this critical moment that we had in 2019. It was, at the beginning, it was a very peaceful movement, but it became in a very violent movement. It was a critical moment, and the president at that time, President Sebastián Piñera, who died just a few weeks ago as a consequence of an helicopter accident in Chile, they had no choice but to establish the state of emergency. But the reaction of the government in front of everything was, okay, we have to listen in what is happening. We have to ask to the Chilean population, what do you really want? So starting with this movement in 2019, everything was started to change. And it is in this context that we must understand the implementation of this feminist foreign policy in Chile. It is in this context that more, let's see, opportunities and more expectations were generated regarding the participation of women in more political and social spaces. And it is in this context that the Chilean society started to be aware about many things that have been happening for decades in my country affecting women. Things like femicide, things like gender violence, things that job opportunities, things like difference in the salaries or income between men and women, and participation in politics. All those things changed since October 2019, and that was the most important experience that we had in terms that this is a very complex situation, but you have to, I mean, the social civility has to work together with the political parties and with the government, with the administration. This is the only way to advance on this very complex process, right?
Thank you, Carlos. And I just want to say that I think I mentioned it, in a week we will be continuing this conversation in New York with my colleague Dr. Tania Haddad and my colleague Carla Ail. We will be continuing the conversation not just in terms of political foreign feminist policies as a tool, but also as political processes. And I think that's the very important part of it, the ways it's part of what is happening internally and part of how we as societies relate with others externally. And in preparing this with Tania and Carla, we were having a conversation with some of our panelists in New York, and one of them reframed the discussion in a way that I find very interesting, which is how would domestic policies and how would foreign policies benefit from being feminists, which is really, you know, all of you have contributed to unpacking this with us right now. And I would like to ask Renata to lead us into closing this session with your last remarks. And basically, I'm trying to get out of the closing remarks myself. So dumping it on you, and then I don't know if our colleague Dr. Panayu is with us. Yes, thank you, Nadine. After this, we will have just a few minutes for refreshments, and we can walk to the amazing AUB Archaeological Museum. So, Renata, the last words.
Thank you so much. It was really amazing to be part of this enriching exchange of ideas, and as I said, I think Brazil has so much to learn from our colleagues in Latin America, and as an inspiration and learned lessons and exchange of experiences. When it comes to what we could say to Lebanese society, I would like to share examples that relate not necessarily to gender, but also to other big challenges that we face in Brazilian society, which is the inclusion of Black people, indigenous people. Brazil has been implemented for more than 20 years quotas for access to universities to Black and indigenous people. And it's been proven after 20 years and with appropriate research analysis that it's a huge success to kind of allow a fast track, let's say, to access to higher education for people that otherwise wouldn't have this access. And this has a very positive effect in allowing people the opportunity of social ascension and a better future for the coming generations, for their families. In many cases, people that have acceded for universities under this quota system were the first in their families to ever had completed superior studies. And also, in spite of all the criticism I may have on the gender policies within my ministry, I also have to acknowledge that our ministry was the first ministry in the Brazilian government to implement quotas to the access of Black people, indigenous people. And it's been very successful as well. We also offer scholarships for candidates to the Foreign Service, which are Black people. And now we have recently established that a part of the scholarships has necessarily to go to female Black candidates, which is even more let's say, a part of our society that it's even more victim of prejudice. I've mentioned to you before that women are only 23% of the Brazilian diplomats, and the black women are, if I'm not mistaken, 3% only. So I am not saying that quotas always work. For instance, when it comes to the candidates to parliament positions, Brazil has had for a long time laws mandating that parties have at least 50% of candidates women, but this has not actually been the case. Either they do not implement or they try to bypass. And unfortunately, we do not have the fortune of having as much women in the parliament as other colleagues here present. But so if quotas are not always the answer, what could be an extra element to support women's empowerment? I think visibility is key. And that's why I wanted to highlight, I highlighted in my speech that the Association of Brazilian Female Diplomats has launched this podcast where they interview our colleagues. They have an important role in their realms. They are leading negotiations. They are leading consular attention. They are leading multilateral or bilateral posts. Because I hear from a lot of young women, and including black women, that they do not see their faces in the ministry or in the public service or in the Brazilian government. If people don't see their faces, if they don't see that they can belong to that place, they don't even try. So I think giving visibility to women that are already part of those institutions is key. When you, in your institutions, in your offices, you have the opportunity to, let's say, compose a table for debate, try to put more women, try to not have only white men in the table, you know, or in picture opportunities, or in composing delegations for missions and so on. I think once young women start to see themselves, start to see other women in those positions, they will get inspired and they will see that's possible. And to finalize, giving an example of a good practice in this area, Brazil is participating, our embassy is participating this year of the initiative called Ambassador for a Day. It's led by the embassies of Canada and the UK, and it's an invitation to young Lebanese girls to apply in a competition, and the winners are going to spend a whole day shadowing one ambassador in one of the embassies here. And we are very happy to participate because I think it's, as I said, one way to give visibility, to show young Lebanese girls that they can do it, and that there are other women diplomats in foreign affairs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Zeina, Renata, Francisco, and Carlos, thank you ever so much for your candid thoughts and for your very sobering thoughts on a very important conversation. As I said, for us, the next discussion is going to be in New York, but then we're coming back to you here to continue this. So please follow Nadine, Dr. Panayo.
And hence the importance of the movie we're going to watch now by Mrs. Denise on showing women diplomats. That's, I think, crucial indeed to add the image. But the other thing, the other issue that I think it's quite a revelation. I was doing a research in our archives one day in the Nahar, Al-Nahar, our journal, Al-Nahar, and I came across pictures of women's rights movements in Lebanon in 1943. And I think this is very important indeed. And what was mind-blowing is that the women were marching, and they were surrounded by men holding hands to protect them. So I think, to answer Joelle, although she's not here anymore, I think our problem is mainly political, because this actually resonates with what His Excellency Romero was saying, that indeed the change has happened socially, but the laws have to be, changed, and this happens with the political power. This is a political executive decision that actually moves on the law system and on the constitution. And therefore, if Lebanon is so much backwards today, it's mainly because of the political situation and political problems rather than a social change. Although we have a population movements today that are going to make things even worse, and they are being worse on a daily basis. This is a fact. So we have a double sword. Thank you.
Quite right. Nadine, we're going to head to the...
yes, so please follow me now to the second...
Please have some refreshments for 2 minutes, and then let's
head to the Archaeological Museum, which is on the other side of the campus.